So we're starting off a new week, and this week we're talking about Chinese New Year. So Chinese New Year is kind of a long period of time. It's celebrated for a while, and it's already pretty much really past, like the official New Year. But the Lantern Festival is coming up on Wednesday, and that's supposed to be the official end of celebrating the Chinese New Year. So, even though we're in February, the Chinese calendar starts a little after the Gregorian calendar, which we talked a little bit about earlier. So it already starts later, and we're at the end of it anyway. So at least from what I found, but maybe what we'll read will, either confirm or correct what I just said. But on Friday, we'll be reading a book that actually focuses on the zodiac sign, the Chinese zodiac sign for this year. And 2025 is the year of the snake. So we're pretty much talking about three different things, just Chinese New Year, the lunar festival, and also the particular zodiac sign of this year. So, yeah. Go ahead and share the screen and open up the first book. Most of the books that I found on Archive were a little bit more on the children's books and juvenile reads. But I'm still anticipating some really good information. Here it is. This is from 2017, so it should be a pretty accurate representation of what goes on today. And the contents. So we have what Chinese New Year is all about, how Chinese New Year spread around the world, how Chinese New Year is celebrated today, and Chinese New Year celebrations across the globe. And here's the introduction. When I was a little girl, I lived with my parents, my grandparents, and my 4 older sisters. I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is home to a large Chinese Canadian community and one of the oldest Chinatowns in North America. My grandfather came to Canada in 1913 at the age of 17 and eventually became a barber. For many years, he owned the only barber shop in Chinatown. He lived in an apartment around the corner from the shop, ate his meals at the Hong Kong Cafe on Pender Street, and stopped at the newsstand every morning to buy papers in English and Chinese. At that time, he was one of a handful of Chinese men who could read both languages and often helped others with reading and writing letters or filling out government forms. For my sisters and me, who were born in Canada, Chinatown felt like home. We knew every restaurant, bakery, and grocery store. On the days we didn't have school, our grandfather would take us to his favorite diner and buy us apple tarts while he had a cup of coffee and a donut. Our mother haggled with the shop owners he saw twice a week, looking for the leanest piece of roast pork belly or the best price on pomelos, a giant citrus fruit the size of a volleyball. When we were sick, we drank the soup the traditional Chinese doctor prepared from dried roots, berries, and herbs. If we drank the sometimes very bitter soup without complaining, the doctor would reward us with a roll of haw flakes, a type of Chinese candy that was round, flat, and slightly chewy. At the end of every winter, in late January or early February, our father took us to watch the Chinese New Year parade, which snaked through Chinatown on New Year's Day. My mother usually stayed home to prepare the New Year's Day meal, an 8-course dinner that took her days to plan. In the damp cold, we watched the dancers, drummers, and martial arts performers march and spin, while firecrackers filled the air with noise and smoke. Our cousins Tony and Sunny were often part of the team of teenage boys who formed the body of the dancing dragon, which was made of silk and held up with long wooden poles. Local politicians and other dignitaries marching in the parade passed out candy to all the children, and we called out, Gong Hei Fat Choi, the traditional New Year greeting that wishes prosperity or wealth for the year ahead. Our faces pink with cold, we piled back into the car and drove home, ready to start eating the sweet, savory hot flakes, I guess. Yeah. Dragons are often printed on calendars and lucky money envelopes. Stone dragons are used to decorate buildings, particularly in pairs and entrances, and brides will often wear Chinese-style silk dress, cheongsam, embroidered with twisting dragons. Sweet chewy dumplings my mother had started frying that morning. There would be crispy shrimp chips, sticky date cake, and steamed cupcakes that looked like tulips. And after that, the big event, a celebratory dinner at which our parents and uncles and aunts would trade happy stories and good wishes long into the night. We ate prawns, noodles, soup, steamed fish, mushrooms, and piles of greens, all cooked by my mother. For dessert, we ate fresh fruit and more candy than we were ever allowed to eat the rest of the year. Chinese people live in many cities throughout the world, and Chinese New Year celebrations are a little bit different everywhere you go. But my family, like most other Chinese families in every part of the world, always rings in the new year with our loved ones, good food, and lots of laughter. Today, now that I'm a mother, I love following the same traditions with my son, going to Chinese New Year parade, teaching him about the different customs and foods, and using that time to talk with our extended family, especially my mother. She still cooks us a huge dinner and greets every single one of her grandchildren with a kiss and a piece of candy. Chinese New Year is always fun, but it's important for me to teach my son that the celebrations are a snapshot of Chinese culture. Every food item means something. The Chinese zodiac is its 12 animal. The Chinese zodiac and its 12 animal signs mean something. The red envelopes of lucky money called Lai Si in Chinese, we give and receive is more than just money. This is also why I'm writing this book. Chinese New Year is a popular and well-known holiday, but like Christmas or Halloween, it grew out of history and stories. To understand Chinese New Year is to understand what makes Chinese culture unique. And I want all of you to celebrate your next Chinese New Year with a deeper understanding of what the dragons and firecrackers really truly mean. So keep reading. What kids say about Chinese New Year. I asked the children in my life, all of whom are members of Chinese Canadian families, to tell me their favorite parts of the celebrations. Here's what they said. Money, and seeing all our grandmas and grandpas, and sitting in our uncle's massage chair. That's right. All right, what Chinese New Year is all about. Mythic origins. Chinese New Year, also known as the Lunar New Year or the Spring Festival, is the biggest holiday in China, in many other countries in Asia, and for the communities of Chinese people who live all over the world. There is gift giving, lots of food, and visiting with family and friends. The celebrations often last for 1 or 2 weeks, so it's a lot like the winter holidays of Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year's Eve all rolled into one. And its origins, like those of Christmas and Hanukkah, are thousands of years old. Chinese New Year has been celebrated for so long that no one knows exactly when it began. Although some historians guess that it began as a holiday around 2000 BCE. According to legend, a mythical beast or monster known as the Nian which is also the Chinese word for year, appeared before the coming of spring, bringing illness and bad luck to families still struggling to survive a long, cold winter. An old man advises villagers to scare the Nian away with the color red, bright lights, and loud noises. So, in the night, the people wore red clothing, hung red banners and paper cutouts in doorways and windows, and lit firecrackers. And it worked. The Nian retreated, and every year on that same day, people in China celebrate this victory over the Nian, but also over the hardship of winter. In the morning, it was a brand new day, and people were ready to begin their preparations for spring and the year's crops. Another legend features the powerful Jade Emperor. In Chinese mythology, the Jade Emperor was in charge of a godly court and oversaw the other gods who were in charge of their own domains, like Tianhao, who governed the sea and protected fishermen, or the kitchen gods, who took care of villages and families. In some Chinese houses, families install a shrine to the kitchen god of their home village, which is usually an open-sided red box with a porcelain figure of that god. During the week, and especially on important dates such as holidays or birthdays, the family will place fruit, tea, and incense in the box as an offering. Keeping the god happy is believed to help the family's fortunes. One day, the Jade Emperor grew frustrated with how to measure the passage of time. He decided to create a calendar and to name each year after an animal. He held a race across a wide river, and the first year would be named for the first animal to cross the finish line. The first was the clever rat, followed by 11 other animals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses that contributed to how quickly or slowly they completed the race. That is why the Chinese calendar or lunar calendar is split into 12-year cycles, with each year named after one of the 12 animals. At the end of the Jade Emperor's race, he held a great celebration for the first day of the new year, the Year of the Rat. You may have noticed that Chinese New Year isn't on the same day every year. That's because holidays usually follow the lunar calendar, which follows the phases of the moon. The Latin word for moon is luna. The traditional Chinese month begins with the new moon, invisible in the night sky, and the days follow the moon as it waxes or grows bigger. Okay. The full moon in the middle of the month then begins to wane or grow smaller until it disappears, marking a new moon and new month. Chinese New Year is celebrated at the beginning of the second month after the winter solstice, or the shortest day of the year. It marks the end of winter as well as the beginning of spring and the start of a brand new year. Each year in the lunar calendar is represented by an animal. The rat, of course, is the first, and the other 11 are the ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. Each of these animals has specific traits. For example, the monkey is mischievous and the rooster is proud. People born in those years are said to have these specific traits. Altogether, these animals and years make up the Chinese zodiac, which works much the same way as the Western zodiac. Your date of birth determines what kind of person you're likely to be. Every year during Chinese New Year celebrations, the coming year's zodiac animal is paid special attention with calendars, paper cutouts, and stuffed toys. In 2016, the year of the monkey, the Taipei Zoo in Taiwan prepared for extra visitors to its 25 species of primates, including chimpanzees, orangutans, and lemurs. And monkey pajamas, cufflinks, and purses were all available for sale. The not-so-mythic story. For centuries, most of the people who lived in China were farmers who rented their farms from wealthy landowners. Usually, these landowners would collect the rent owed them on the last day of the year. New Year's Eve, this New Year's Eve. This, of course, was a day that filled farmers with dread. Sometimes the harvest hadn't been plentiful and the farmers hadn't saved enough money. Sometimes the landowners would raise the rent without notice. Surviving this day was a goal for many families. The next day, the first day of the new year, was often celebrated with a grand feast, loud fireworks, and games of mahjong, the popular Chinese tile game that is sometimes compared to poker. My grandmother and mother were dedicated to mahjong players and were dedicated mahjong players, and both had a large circle of friends with whom they organized games that lasted long into the night. For many Chinese women who moved to Canada or other countries, mahjong tournaments became an essential way for them to meet other women and make friends. Most of these women were stay-at-home wives and mothers and therefore didn't socialize at workplaces as their husbands did. So, in organizing mahjong parties, they got to know one another, developed lifelong friendships, and celebrated the end of another big winter, which was always cause for great joy. As Chinese communities grew around the world, these home celebrations eventually became the elaborate Chinese New Year festivals. This mythic and non-mythic, these mythic and non-mythic stories are the basis for how Chinese people around the world celebrate the New Year today. People still dress in red and light firecrackers, and in many countries you'll see red and gold banners hanging in shop windows. Often one of the 12 calendar's animals, such as a dragon, pig, or monkey, is on the banners. Like many different holidays from other cultures, Chinese New Year honors tradition and the old stories passed down from generation to generation. How Chinese New Year changed. Chinese New Year usually falls between January 21st and February 19th and began as a public celebration in the 14th century. Until 1912, China was under imperial rule, meaning it was governed by emperors and empresses who inherited their roles through their families, very much like the kings and queens of other countries, such as England. After 1912, China became a republic, or a country governed by a constitution, a document that describes how the country is to be run and what rights and freedoms citizens have. At the time, the government wanted China to become more Western and to appear more modern, so it began calling the New Year celebrations the Spring Festival instead, hoping that the people of China would start honoring the Western New Year. However, many world events that occurred in the years that followed affected Chinese citizens in everyday ways, including how and when they celebrated holidays. World War II and the Communist Party, which still governs China today, were especially important to the country's history. There were many years, even up until the 1980s, when villages and cities didn't mark the holiday at all. Many ordinary Chinese families were poor, and the government was still trying to build up the country after the devastating destruction of World War II. That war, which lasted in China from 1937 to 1945, is still a painful memory for many Chinese people. The war was fought in many countries of Europe and is most remembered as a long-running conflict between Nazi Germany and the allied countries of Great Britain and France. But it was also fought in Asia, where Japan battled to gain control of other Asian countries, including China. Japanese forces entered, fought in, and occupied much of China, including big cities like Shanghai. As many as 20 million Chinese people died during the years of fighting. Hold on, I have some food cooking I need to go check out. lentils and Brussels sprouts for dinner today. It smells really good. I put a bunch of garlic in there, good amount of salt, pepper, and they should be almost done. So then I just put in some Brussels sprouts. So yeah, I also put a bay leaf in there. Not sure about that. I think it'll be good though because I put in a lot of garlic. Okay. By the 1980s and 90s, China was loosening its strict rules on businesses. Its citizens had more money than ever before, and they wanted to celebrate their good fortune. So the Spring Festival, as it's still called, became the biggest annual holiday in China and in Chinese communities around the world. It became so big that the Chinese government officially made it a week-long national holiday, a time when people can take time off work, rest, and enjoy themselves. When politics and holidays collide. Whenever we talk about the history of Chinese New Year, it's important to talk about politics. China has been through a lot in the 20th and 21st centuries. The government has undergone many changes and has had a direct impact, and this has had a direct impact on the celebrations during Chinese New Year. During and after World War II, families in China were struggling to survive after years of violence that left the country in ruins. Two political groups, the Communist Party and the Kuomintang, also known as the Nationalist Party of China, were fighting each other trying to gain control of the government. It was very disorganized after the war. Eventually, in 1949, the Communist Party formed the People's Republic of China, which China is still officially known as today. Until the 1980s, the Communist Party enforced very strict laws for the country's citizens, including the famous one-child policy that limited families to having only one child. At that time, China's population was growing quickly. The government worried about producing enough food and having to build more homes, wanted to slow that growth down. In 1958, China's then leader, Chairman Mao Zedong, sometimes also known as Mao Zedong, started a program which was called the Great Leap Forward, designed to help China move quickly into manufacturing and away from farming. People were forced to live and work in communes or camps. Farms were bulldozed for the building of factories, making food scarce. No one knows for sure how many people died because of starvation or forced labor during the 4 years of the Great Leap Forward, but the number could be anywhere from 18 to 45 million. In order to recover from the devastation caused by the Great Leap Forward, the government then created several new programs across the country to make sure everyone had enough food to eat. While this helped end the famine, it also angered Chairman Mao. Because the Great Leap Forward had been his idea, he saw its failure as an attack on him personally. He felt betrayed by the government's decision to end the Great Leap Forward. In 1966, he began a movement called the Cultural Revolution, which was meant to take down the government he had built. During the revolution, several million people who had opposed Mao's decision died from violence, often because of the Red Guards, an army made up of ordinary young people, some as young as 15 or 16 years old. They were encouraged to oppose their local leaders and were responsible for much of the violence that lasted until 1976. I don't remember reading about that before. I guess a lot of the history books don't really go into what happened after World War II very much. But I feel like the Great Leap Forward not working. I think I learned about that, but I don't remember learning about this piece. I probably did. I just don't remember. All right. Although Mao Zedong is talked about in other parts of the world as a dictator, a government leader who doesn't listen to people or his advisors, his reputation within China is still mostly positive. Because the Communist Party has been in government since 1949, it controls the information about Mao and his policies. In fact, Chairman Mao's government produced many posters, songs, books, and plays that carried a hidden message that the Communist Party and Mao Zedong were doing a great job of governing China. This was one of many ways Chairman Mao kept control over a huge country and hundreds of millions of people. Much of what we know about him is still centered in China, where he is seen as the father of modern China. During the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, Chinese New Year was hardly celebrated at all. Chinese citizens had little or no spending money, and many families were simply concerned with trying to survive. Celebrating any holiday just wasn't a priority. However, in the 1980s, when China began to encourage people to start and build businesses, many people started making and spending more money. New Year celebrations began to grow. Now, China is one of the richest and most powerful countries in the world, and the Spring Festival is an elaborate and extravagant holiday. However, the Chinese government continued to make headlines for the way it treats its citizens, particularly those who have spoken out about human rights or democracy. In 1989, the military violently shut down protests that university students had organized, including a famous one in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Thousands of protesters died there. Now, organizations are protesting on behalf of the people who work in the many factories throughout China that manufacture items such as smartphones, toys, and clothing. During the New Year holiday, these underpaid workers, who usually live in dormitory style buildings owned by the factories, could not afford to travel to their home cities to visit their families. And so during the Spring Festival, demonstrations are often organized and protesters get arrested. In a country that has experienced and continues to experience so much turmoil, inevitably the year's biggest holiday is affected. Chinese school and the New Year. Like many children from Chinese families living in North America, I attend Chinese language school on Saturday mornings until I was 13. Our parents, who mostly spoke Chinese at home, were worried that we would grow up speaking only English, so language lessons were very important to them. We learned to read, write, and speak Cantonese, a common dialect many Chinese people speak. Chinese New Year was very important in these classes. Teaching us about the traditions and stories was a way to make learning fun. We cooked tea, the special sweet and salty snack, often dumplings, and performed songs in New Year concert for our families. Our teachers brought in special brushes and bottles of ink so we could try making our own banners with calligraphy, a type of writing that is similar to painting, just like the villagers did when they scared away the Nyan. The best part for me was when the entire school gathered around the head teacher and she told us the stories of the Nyan and the 12 racing animals. As I'm sure you can imagine, going to school on Saturday was not my favorite thing to do, but I understand now that it was important for me to participate in the culture my parents and grandparents came from. My son has just recently said he would like to learn Chinese, so it seems that the tradition of going to school on the weekend will be passed on to at least one more generation. Well, we're talking about demonstrations, we're talking about the new year, we're talking about history, we're talking about cooking. So we already have one book coming up. The cover has a family eating already. I figure if we go to a restaurant, then that'll be the one for a restaurant. So we could think about demonstrations for this one, maybe. Go to a demonstration. I wouldn't say put on a demonstration because I think it's actually pretty sacred. Demonstration. Um, I even found a craft book that I was considering to include in the list, but and I didn't look very far into the author, but I wasn't entirely sure if the author uh, would agree with a good number of most of those who participate. Anyway. So I didn't do the crafting just because I think it is a pretty sacred time of year. Let's just look up famous Chinatowns. You could just go to a local or go to a Chinatown and attend one of their demonstrations. That could be the travel study. Um, Thinking like historical relevance, right? It could be to look out. It could be kind of a hunt for indicators of the year's zodiac sign. So, I like that. So, you go to different Chinese um, Chinatowns. Okay. Uh, you don't have to go to a Chinatown to get a demonstration, but you know, Chinatown for traveling, read up on the zodiac sign for that year, and then look for maybe even physical and metaphorical representations of acknowledging that year. Okay. So I'm going to actually type this in today. I'm not going to use my notebook because it seems to lose a bit of time. Yeah, I'm going to stop the dinner and then I'll be back. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll type that in and we'll be done for the day. It's almost time to be done anyway. template. And I'm just going to put it in here from the get-go. Okay, so, and again, it's called Chinese New Year, a celebration. I think I like putting it in different places because it makes me have to think about it. It makes me have to address every detail about it if I have to, read it and then copy it over. But I think every now and then it's okay to take a break from that. Chinatowns throughout the world. Throughout the United States. New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Say, read about the zodiac sign of the upcoming year. Oh, that's not really the right thing to do, is it? It can be. Look for ways.
I think that's good.
I, all right, and that's it. We're done with that for today. And I'm going to practice geography again. Because I'll have to get these things right. Let's see. What am I looking? Oh, Vermont. No. North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi. This is Colorado. Okay. All right, well, look at that. I did reach my goal. I got into the 90%. So, yeah, this area is a little rough. Kansas, I know Kansas is like smack dab in the middle. Nebraska's getting mead in the back by Colorado. Minnesota, it does look like a little soda can, crushed up, or mini soda can. Um, and Ohio, like I mentioned, Ohio is always further over than I imagined in my head. Always, Indiana. This whole section right here is kind of rough for me. But anyway, we did better. We should be able to do a little bit better next time. I think everything else is pretty solid. We got the soda situation. Ohio is right next to West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Alabama, yeah, Alabama, and then Mississippi. I thought this was anyway. All right, Mississippi right next to Louisiana. All right, so see you tomorrow for a little bit about Chinese New Year.